The Belvedere has been a major part of the Saranac Lake area for almost 90 years. It opened in 1933 and had been owned and operated by the same family since that time. When that family was ready to move on, the Chamber didn't want to see the Bell close, and the community didn't want to lose such a valuable business.
ANCA, the Adirondack North Country Association, works with small business owners and folks who want to be small business owners to take over businesses through the Center for Businesses in Transition. We're a dynamic, regional partnership of organizations and leaders focused on keeping our small businesses open here in the North Country.
When I had the opportunity to move back here full-time in 2020 and started really looking for businesses, I looked at a number of properties. This one is so multifaceted. It just has an incredible amount of potential. When this opportunity presented itself, I really jumped on it because I felt like it was an active part of the community in a way that other investments just aren't.
An opportunity like this comes around once in a lifetime, and with the background and experience I have over the years with different aspects of the restaurant business, I think it made a lot of sense to apply that to a place that is so historic. With that experience, it will allow me to honor the history and respect it, and also bring out some modern stuff as well.
Without the support of ANCA and the Center for Businesses in Transition and the Chamber, I would not have been able to navigate through this. It is challenging, and they were incredibly helpful. Working through this as we have for the last 2 years has been tough, but part of the advantage of that is we came together pretty closely, and now we're not just business partners, but partners in our personal life as well.
Thankfully, with the local support from different organizations, there is support out there if you reach out to help you navigate through some of these obstacles along the way.
It's a very active partnership. I felt guided through that process, which was really, really helpful.
We are thrilled to congratulate Chrissy and John on their successful transition to owning the Belvedere restaurant here in Saranac Lake.
Thank you to ANCA, the New York State SBDC, the CBIT program, and the Northern Border Regional Commission for helping to keep this amazing business in our community.
Woohoo!
That was awesome. Wow.
Rachel, floor is all yours.
All right, so we did a ribbon cutting, and it was in conjunction as well with a business after hours at the Belvedere. That was last week, and had this amazing video created as well, which was done through Big Bang Boom Productions in Saranac Lake. And so overall, really successful event, and really brought, I think, awareness, of course, to the Belvedere and the transition that happened, but also the CBIT program. There was a lot of kind of follow-up questions about, oh, you know, what is CBIT and what do you do and what do you do as a liaison, and questions from not only just like general members of the community, but people on our Chamber Board of Directors. And we had some elected officials at the ribbon cutting as well that asked some of those questions too. So I think it was really good, you know, outreach in that sense, that it really kind of showcased CBIT and the partnerships. And then of course it was wonderful for the Belvedere. They really got a lot of PR through the video. The newspapers picked it up, Press Republican, Enterprise, Sun Community News. And they were really, really pleased and thankful for the support from ANCA and the Chamber and CBIT. So I think that pretty much covers it. In terms of that event, we had, I don't know, what would you say, Danny, 50 people there?
I would say 60. I was trying to count the like pockets of people. It was somewhere between 50 and 60.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. And
that was probably one of our bigger after hours for Saranac Lake too, right? The biggest one was at the waterfront.
Yeah, it was definitely, it was good numbers for a business after hours that, you know, usually we tell people to plan, you know, between like 20 to 30 people for a regular business after hours. So this one definitely brought in more people, which the ribbon cutting, I think, was a big draw for folks. And people were genuinely interested in seeing the changes and supporting the restaurant and just kind of getting some more information about it. So it was great.
we got that email from John afterwards that they had their busiest weekend since they opened after the ribbon cutting and all the press going out about them. So, even just that little bump is great.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and I'll just add, Christy had reached out to us collectively and had talked to Patrick in the position previously. I had talked to her a number of times. She had come to some of our workshops and programming and part of the conference. So very exciting. Any questions that folks have for Rachel about the transition process, the video, the experience, anything like that?
I'm sorry, Rachel. I missed who did the production for you?
It was Bing Bang Boom.
Bing
It's
Bang
Kirk.
Boom.
Yep, it's Kirk Sullivan.
Okay. Did a great job.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, very, very well done.
He also works with Jordan Craig Media, I think, who did some of the drone shots. Was that correct, Danny? Yeah.
Cool.
Ben, Laura, if Jernobi wants to do a video, we have some money left to spend. You can pick your videographer in St. Lawrence County or elsewhere.
I already know who that would be.
I was gonna say, we can't actually afford Kirk. The only reason that he did it was because he's on the chamber board and gave us
okay.
discount. So yeah. But you pick the person, we'll show up and
okay. No, I mean, we have a production crew that we work with here in St. Lawrence County. They're actually new chamber members. So
woo!
Yeah, and they've been doing some great work with us for our promotion and tourism work. So this could be that could be a nice thing. So there you go, Laura. When you talk with Stephanie, run that idea by her. Good, it'd be like phenomenal promotion for her too.
And so what we've tried to do in the past, and just as a kind of is like the press release, a big press release goes out at the same time. The video drops, and the same day we do the grand opening ribbon cutting celebration. Inca's taken the lead on helping to get those press releases crafted if needed. And we also will make sure that elected officials from our region are there. And
awesome.
Yeah, so great. Thank you so
Super
much.
cool. Well done, gang, on that. Rachel and Danny and everyone, great job on the video with Belvedere. I thought that was phenomenal, and everything that went with it, all the press releases and ribbon cuttings, and wow, awesome. Inspired.
If you have a video that you want produced though, guys, like we need to do it in the next month and a half. We are trying to close out the NBRC grant, so we need to spend down that money if we're going to do it. So month, August, anybody? I don't mind if that's my entire August. It's just like ribbon cuttings and videos. Just holler and we'll make it happen. I know Christy, Rochelle, we talked a little bit about maybe some of the businesses that are already transitioned in Hamilton County, just going around and doing kind of a subset kind of thing. That might be an option too.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that something you think you could line up for some folks in August, or?
I can try. It's the same thing with, people not showing up for the meetings. Everybody's so busy in August. But I can try to sit down with Christy and maybe try to line some things up.
Okay, great. Let me know.
Danny, would Tug Hill Vineyards be one that we could do?
Sure.
Okay. I'll check with them to see if that's been over a year now, but I think it's still a good story and they're doing some awesome things. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. Jenna, let's get your update. And also I wrote on here because I saw it on your thing and I wanted to know more, and I'm sure other people do want to know more. So your update about what's going on with you. Tell us a little bit more in your update, if you don't mind, about the CDBG grant through Lewis County to assist some of the transitions.
Yeah, sure. So we announced July 1st, I think it was, our CDBG micro enterprise grant funds went out to 9 businesses in Lewis County. They're CDBG funds, so they have to be 5 or less employees and low to moderate income individuals, either the owners or they have to be creating a low to moderate income position through the grant. We try to avoid the job creation as much as possible, just because it's really hard for a new business to create that job in the first year. So most of the applicants were low to moderate income individuals. One of them is a transitioning business. Vanilla Bean Bake Shop is buying Gary's Restaurant in Lowville. And they have a signed purchase agreement, which is super exciting. So we're moving forward with that. It's been a slow process, but what she's doing is moving her bakery from her home into this downtown space. That was previously a diner. It's still open, actually, with the previous owner. She'll be kind of reimagining the diner to be more creative foods, and then have a separate section for the bakery as well. So very cool business moving into a downtown space. No other transitioning businesses on that list, but some really cool new businesses. We have a mobile tack shop, which I'm super excited about. We have the Otter Creek horse trails in our region that are like over 70 miles of horse trails in the wilderness. And this individual saw a need for equine supply shop, but is making it mobile so that he can go to different shows and things at fairs and different events. So very unique business. That's just another example of that. But $180,000 to local businesses, which is super exciting. Other updates, the purchase agreement is huge. And then we are working with Point Positive and Clarkson on a workshop for entrepreneurs, which I believe is in several of the regions that are part of ANCA. Ours is going to be the first one, August 17th in Carthage, and we're partnering with Jefferson County to do that. We're super excited to have created that. We've had this relationship with Clarkson, but we're really leveraging it to offer these different services to our entrepreneurs. And the workshop is really focused on creating your pitch. So looking for different investors and financing. How do you put your pitch together and what does that entail? So super excited about that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenna. That's really great. Do you think this vanilla bean situation, can we get a video before?
I know. I'm like, if we can, I don't think she's going to have the new setup yet, but we could maybe get an interview with her and
Great. Let's do it.
see what we can throw together in August.
Whatever we can sneak in there. And even if she's transition, like, but if they have if the documents are signed,
Yep.
and we can get in there and talk about her transition story, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I will chat with her and see. We've been going back and forth on timeline, and she's got a couple of different financing scenarios teed up. So she's really just working on that piece right now. So I'll keep you in the loop on the timeline, and we'll see if we can make it work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so moving on. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add or go back to? And Ben, I saw your link in the chat. The video is linked in today's agenda.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Yep.
cool. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. But I'll put it in the chat as well, so in case somebody doesn't have access to that. Not a problem. Let me do that real quick before I forget. There we go. And I hate seeing myself talk. Anybody else hate that? All right. Okay, we have the buyer.
But you were awesome. You did great.
Needed the haircut, that's for sure. Buyer Basics and Beyond, the video series, also linked in the agenda, is the whole series. So if you have, and it's up to date buyer's process from start to finish, 3 solid sections. The series is linked in the agenda. So if you have a potential buyer who needs the basics, like there's a 3-set video series ready to go. You can send it out via your social. You can send it just to somebody who asks, oh, I really want to buy a business. This is their first step, right? Have them watch the videos, then circle back with you to talk more, because then they'll have all the basics of what they need and what the selling process looks like. Feel free to share that out through your channels. Make sure that, take all the credit, that's fine. And get that out in the world for buyers. So we had 36 registrants for the programs, for the program itself, actively engaged. 7 of them are actively engaged in a business transaction, and 3 of them were during the series. So that's huge. That's like a huge turnaround for having somebody come and then being like, oh, this is actually the business I'm looking at. I'm now talking to the person and moving forward. So that is a really big, and then 4 had already picked out a business before they had come to the series. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say? 3 of them found a business that they started talking to while they were doing the series. 4 of them had been talking to a business previously and then did the series. 2 are pursuing business acquisition without a business in mind yet. 19 of them generally are just took it and are just learning about the stuff without any particular intention. 4 sellers attended to sort of get the other perspective of what buyers were looking for, and 4 economic development partners. And at the end of that, the goal is to build buyer profiles. The goal was to build buyer profiles for folks looking to purchase a business who didn't have an idea exactly of what they wanted yet and wanted to narrow that down. So there's only really about 2 people that need to build those sheets, because everybody else is either not interested, just kind of looking, or has a business in mind already. Laura, he took the series first and now is talking to Miola. He went through it, that gentleman.
That was one that I think was the result of the series, is that I think his name is David, saw the businesses available through either Danny or somebody else and is now talking to Marianne. So it's pretty cool.
And specifically, Laura and Ben have been working, and I have been working with Marianne for 4 years. And Kim has recently come in to help with her valuation again. So this is somebody who's been one of our first clients and finally found somebody who was the first time I've ever heard her be like, no, this is it. This is the person. Who's to say what happens? Who knows? Yeah. But it was a very different conversation than we've had with her in the past. Laura, do you have anything, or Ben, do you have anything to add to that situation to kind of just apprise us of?
I'll add my little 2 cents, and you guys probably know this because you've dealt with her for so long. One of the things we talk about with sellers is, what are your priorities? And for some it's price, for some it's I want to get out fast, for some it's I want my employees to be taken care of and I want my customers to be taken care of. And that is 100% the case with Marianne. She doesn't really care. She wants a fair price, but she would much rather find somebody that's going to take care of her employees and take care of her customers. And she feels really, really good about this guy. And so I really, really, really hope it works out for her. Oh, you're muted, Laura. Honey, sorry. I think if you hit your space, there you go.
Yeah, it was funny because in the discussion that I was part of, the first thing Marianne did was take her price and lower it by $100,000. I thought Kim was going to lose her mind. Kim's like, no. It was hilarious.
And I even said this, I'm like, David, I promise you, if Marianne had talked to me before we got on this call or before she talked to you, I'm like, she wants you to have this business because, so yes. I'm like,
I thought Kim was going to lose it. Kim, you should have saw Kim's face. She's like, wow.
But again, that just shows that the price doesn't matter to her, right? She wants this to work for this guy. So
yep.
It's
Yeah, it
awesome.
was pretty funny. But we were just supposed to talk about like what they needed, and then it was like full on negotiation, and like, and Marianne just being like, "I'm gonna give you this," pretty
Yeah.
much.
And I'll hold paper for 25 years. Like that.
Calm down, Marianne. God love her.
Okay.
All right, I got a hot question for y'all. Please share that. Let us know how you share it if it works out for you. Who has a marina? Anybody have a marina that is
Yeah,
under
Martha's
the radar?
Marina in Clayton. No, it's Cape Vincent.
Yeah, too far away. Anybody have a marina not as far away?
You mean for
From
potential transition, you mean?
Yeah, I have some folks looking for one.
Oh, no. We had a couple just a couple months ago, and I don't believe that they sold. I think they took them off the market.
Can you follow up with them, Rochelle, and send them to me as soon as possible, and I'll send them to this potential buyer?
Sure.
Cool. Thank you. Just
And
putting
I
it
hate
out.
to say it. Sorry, Danny. Like kind of like we shared in the buyers series, like they should go talk to marina owners in the area that they're interested, right? And just be like, I'm interested in buying a marina. If you're ever thinking about selling, here's my buyer's profile, because like we've said 100 times, very often folks are interested in transitioning. They just don't know how to take the first step.
Yep, absolutely. I did provide them that advice, but I think it might be helpful if we could at least send them what we have. So we'll see what goes on. Great. All right, follow-ups from last month program stuff. See, I think I talked about this last month. The CFA, New York State CFA process for aggregating some of the businesses together and putting in an ESD application was a no-go after talking to ESD a little while. I think we might have some options for next year when some of the businesses are closer to transition that are much larger businesses, but there's also through the CFA consolidated funding application process through New York State. There's some new guidelines around any of the businesses having any retail component being ineligible too. And a lot of our businesses kind of fall in that space. So it wasn't going to happen for this year, but something we can circle back to next year. And maybe by next year, they're a little more flexible. We'll see. That being said, we're putting in some money for National Grid. The grant is going to go out for CBIT specifically. The grant will hopefully go out by my goal is Monday night. So I need to ask you all a very time sensitive request. If I send you a letter of support template today, is there any way by Monday at close of business, you can just put your letterhead on it, add a few words and send it back? Yes. Thank you. And as per usual, there will be somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000 for each organization to be able to participate for market, advertise your time, that sort of thing. And so the goal there is for them to sponsor the conference for next year, additional workshops and programming, your time and efforts to market and promote the program, and for them to also sponsor, drum roll please, something we've been talking about for a long time, which is if there is a aspiring entrepreneur who is vetted in some way, like they've attended some programs, they've identified a business that they're interested in, they are a really good candidate. We don't have the exact parameters of what this looks like yet, that we will arrange as a partnership for their travel to the North Country if they don't live here, to stay overnight, meet with the business owner, meet with the chamber director, and have the full community experience of the community that they would like to buy a business in. I don't know if Ben just rolled his eyes or he was just thinking about that in depth.
The fire alarm just went off.
Oh.
It drives me crazy. So that's why my eyes rolled. I'm like, oh, fire alarm again. It wasn't you, Danny. I'm really excited about that news though. That's great.
So we're going to put that application into National Grid. to NYSEG, and then to Glens Falls National Bank. And hopefully with those 3 things, we'll have money for CBIT continuing into the next year. Great. And we got a big conference goal for next year of 250 attendees. Last time it was 183. I think we can absolutely do it, especially if we're going to be able to do a hybrid option. So if you are the person, and I will say this to everyone in an email, we're going to have it somewhere in person at a conference center or something like that. If you are really excited about the conference, and this has been something that's been, near and dear to your heart, and you want to have it in your area and are willing to put in some extra time and effort to help with logistics to make sure it is in your area, please let me know and we can start talking about that.
What, Danny, about how many attendees at the conference? Just ballpark.
Shooting for 250 attendees. Okay. However, it is going to be, we're going to pay for, hopefully get the money, pay for it to be hybrid. So it might not be 250 in person. It might be, some percentage thereof.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, you guys can think about it. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I mean, I do that all the time, but in this case, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. Great. And we would want to start getting that started to plan that as soon as possible. So think about that. Interview process. We talked about shortening the interview process and having a cheat sheet instead of the form and a few things from last month. I didn't get those ready yet, but they'll be ready before your sellers working group in the fall. Yesterday was a really exciting day. So there's a new federal co-chair for the Northern Border Regional Commission. His name is Chris Saunders. For those of you who might be new or don't know, Northern Border Regional Commission has funded CBIT for the first 3.5 years. So up until now. And then this year, we also have funding from the USDA to continue the program. There's a new federal co-chair. He came up yesterday to our area to meet with us about the grant and what work we've been doing. And we visited Happy Camping RV in Bloomingdale. We visited Circle Court Motel. We visited Silver Bay General Store. We also did a presentation in Inga's office. Rich Grogan, who's the executive director of Northern Border Regional Commission, Kyle Wilbur at the Department of State in New York came, and then also Mark Pattinson, who is also at the Department of State, but is the second for this particular program through the state, came, and we gave them the tour of all these things happening. And I can't tell you how enthusiastic they were, and just wow, it's obviously working. And that was a really great feedback. They were super enthusiastic. They're never going to give us more money for the program because that's not what they do. They don't like to fund things more than once, but they're just really happy with all the work that you're doing out there in the field. I wish Matt or Russ were here today because they visited with them as well while we were in Franklin County. And but there was just some really positive things going on, and we talked about all of the liaison work and how important it is. And I think there was just a really good taste in their mouth about what's going on and the strides that we've made. So congratulations everyone to helping to make that successful, and this sort of capping off this particular grant going to be a positive report and review of that. So speaking of which, we will be closing out this particular grant soon. So there'll be a 4-year case study instead of a three-year case study ready for you all that you can share with your board and all that, and just kind of the whole wrap up of this launch time period will give you some really great materials to be able to share with your networks and people. So moving on, I've talked way too much during this meeting. I apologize. So we're going to talk to you. You all can talk. So part of the sellers working group that we're doing right now or that you're training for right now, is to put on your own sellers working group in the fall. So here are the questions. When are you going to start? How are you going to promote it? What do you need from ANCA and CBIT? Are you going to do it in a hybrid model? Are you going to do it in your office? What are you thinking about? What do you need to do that? And kind of have you put some dates on the calendar? So we're just going to go do a couple round robins and see how people are feeling about that. And then we will just want to make sure that the juices are marinating on getting your workshop set up. So I'm going to start with Jenna, if you don't mind if I put you on the spot.
Sure. I actually have a few questions, I guess. Is there a deadline that we have to finish this by? Is number one.
Technically December 30th.
By December. Okay. And I'm not really sure where to start, I guess. I was talking to Brittany about this, and I think we have some good businesses that have been in the program for a long time and that really could use this push that to kind of create that community of sorts, so that they can communicate with each other, but also move to the next step in the process. So I would like to do it in person and for a couple of weeks in a row or every other week is kind of what I'm envisioning. But I would like to also hear what other people have planned to see maybe I'll change plans. We've been doing a lot of commingling with Jefferson County just because the market is so similar. So I would consider maybe doing a Jeff Lewis working group if Kayla would be interested in that. I haven't really talked to her about that yet. And I think promotion wise, it's going to have to be a lot of personal outreach to those individual businesses. But if we can get some new businesses in there too, that would be great.
Jenna, that's a great start to the conversation. And you had started it saying, I don't know what I'm doing. And then you had a bunch of things about what you were doing. And
some ideas, but not necessarily like content wise. I'm not really sure where to start with that. And I think that will probably lead on you and Kim to help structure that a little bit.
That's the whole, so you have the first hour. It's kind of a 3-hour program. You have the first hour, which was kind of the overview. Today, we'll talk about the second hour. And then over the next couple of sessions, we'll provide you with that third hour of content. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a decent level of comfort with the content.
Sounds great. Cool.
Jenna, we'll come back to you and once everybody else has spoken, and then we'll do another round about like what you think you need. Like, what is it that you need for additional support? Great. Laura, Ben, do one or either of you want to take this on?
Laura, do you want me to take it or are you going?
You can take it.
Okay. Yeah, it's very much, I think, the same boat as Jenna. Not really sure how we want to go about doing it really. You know, we've actually got quite a list of, you know, clients in our area, in our county now. So that puts us in an interesting position. Questions. One, do we have like previous excuse me, or some kind of template material that we can use for promotional of this that we could maybe recycle?
Do you want that? So here's it's a question for you guys a little bit. Like, do you want a template because they're all going to be similar enough, right? Like if you're all doing it like for 3 weeks and it's going to be, you know, at certain dates and times versus maybe somebody wants to do it all in one day. Like,
oh yeah, that's true. There, could be very highly variable. So it probably needs to be,
we could provide probably some, since we have done marketing for the sellers working groups, we might be able to provide you with like a template and some examples.
Or even something that just like describes the content.
Yeah.
would be
Yes.
good. And then you could fill in the specifics of the logistical aspects of it,
Yep.
like the when, where, how, all that stuff. So I don't know. I want to hear what other people have to say, I'll be honest.
All right, we'll come back to you and Laura. Well, Rachel talks to us a little bit about her plans.
So I just kind of initial thoughts. I was thinking of timeline aiming towards early November. And I was kind of thinking either doing it all virtual, or maybe doing like the first hour virtual and then a follow-up in person, but maybe that depends on who attends. And I haven't talked to Russ about it yet, but I was also thinking that it might make sense for him and I to coordinate since some of our area overlaps. And I think that's where I'm at this point.
Great. Laura, I'll put you on the spot to add or think about what Ben threw out there. Anything else you want to add to the pot?
Is there a video from the previous sellers workshop that we can look at so we can kind of get a feel for how it's supposed to be set up? And I forgot all about it until I saw the agenda today, quite honestly. So I haven't been thinking about it. So I'll be quite honest. So
Problem.
until I read it, I was like, ah, crap.
I
hadn't
just
thought of that.
I just threw a question in the chat, Danny, based on the experiences of the previous workshops and everything, and since we've got, a wide range of potential parties here in St. Lawrence County in terms of where they are, can you speak to maybe like the ideal party to have participating in this?
Well, I'll start us off and then let Kim talk about that a little bit more.
Okay, great.
But really, this is a sellers working group, right? So you're putting on something where it's someone who is looking to sell publicly. So that's not all of your clients, right? Somebody might have something internally, they're not ready to do that, whatever that looks like. And somebody might not know if they're ready or not, but want to get that stuff ready. So, but that's the ideal client, is somebody who is ready to sell publicly. Kim, do you want to add to that or kind of mince my words if you need?
So I think it's without question folks that are ready to sell, but also I would say people that think they want to sell in 3 to 5 years, because those folks, there's a lot that they can do between now and then to get their business in a better position to sell. And I think understanding what that process ultimately looks like can help them make changes now. And so whether the target market for the whole series is somebody that's ready for now, but maybe the first and potentially part of the second session could be, definitely the first session could be for anybody that's interested in selling now or 5 years from now.
Okay.
And then because we get a little more in the weeds with sessions 2 and 3 about the actual process and sell sheets and financing options, that kind of thing, those are more for folks that are ready to sell within the next year or 18 months, or, we say it takes 3 to 5 years, but people that are ready to actively pursue selling.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. Because part of my thinking here, so it's interesting. So like you could have some attend the like first session and then narrow it down on sessions 2 and 3.
Exactly.
That's great. Okay, that's really interesting and good, because we have, I think, a number of parties, and we should catch you up on this, but like we've heard of several entities that are looking to sell in our county. And this could be a good way to, you know, introduce them to the process. Also, but you know, the party area I'm really thinking about are the ones that kind of need something to help them get off the dime. You know,
Okay.
and there are some that, you know, I know they want to, we know they want to sell, but they're like not like going at it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
this could be a real like way to get them going.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that first session kind of walks through the whole process, digs in on sellers' discretionary earnings and what they can do to increase that, you know, training their employees so that they're not selling a job, they're selling a business that, you know, just like, I think the first one's a great one for anybody now or 5 years from now. And then they can decide if they want to continue with a little more, you know, hands-on, here's how you value your business.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Okay, great. That's really super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Rochelle, what do you got? You want to talk about your plans if you're ready to talk about that?
We don't really have any definite plans as of yet. I think that we will probably go with either a fully virtual or a hybrid plan just because we cover such a large geographical area. It's really hard to get people together in person. So if we have that online option, maybe we'll get more participation. Probably sometime in the late fall when things are a little bit quieter and before the snowmobile season really picks up. But yeah, I think we'll go along the same lines of a lot of personal outreach to the businesses that we do know are looking to sell.
Great. Thank you so much. Jenna, I did say that I would circle back to you. I want to make sure that that I do that. Is there anything you wanted to add or talk about?
I had to step out for a minute, but I had just had a thought. Would it be pertinent to bring in speakers, kind of like you've been doing, Kim, to talk about these different topics? Like, could we bring in a lawyer and a local people to talk about it? Or would you advise against that?
Probably not a lawyer unless the lawyer is kind of looking for, you know, they're an expert in the field and could be available, because that part of the challenge is finding an attorney that has experience with business transitions. So that would be good.
Or even like a business that's been through it before.
Yeah, that would be a great one, is just business owners that have been through the process and can kind of speak to best practices and things like that. Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, that was my only other thought. Good.
Steve, do you think this would be something that Living ADK would want to sort of put on in your region? Yeah.
Yes.
How
So,
can we support you?
Actually, I have a couple questions, but Dan Kieferbach and I have talked, and what we were thinking we'd like to start with is not actually the sellers workshop, but bring in the real estate agents, the bankers or fund providers, and maybe even lawyers that specialize in this kind of thing, and introduce them to the program, and then get them to be a conduit or a referral source for these folks that are thinking about selling. And then we could put on the sellers workshop. And here, I certainly haven't talked to Dan or Robin about this yet, but I think it's pretty obvious we would want to focus on in person. We have plenty of venues to do it. We pretty much know, I say we, I should say they, because it's not we, it's they, know who's thinking about selling, who's not. So the marketing aspect wouldn't be hard. We would involve the Inland Area Business Association, because we're basically an area of really tiny little towns. So everybody knows everybody and what's going on. So I don't think the sellers workshop would be that hard to pull off, but we want to start with the people that don't know about this program so that they get the word out, and then that should then feed the sellers workshop. And I am curious about the December cutoff. What's that all about?
So the folks who are getting funding from the USDA RCDI grant, in order for us to close out the grant, they have to have completed their working groups by December. You don't need to do that if you don't, because you.
Okay.
So if a different timeline works for you, that is fine.
Okay. So that's my thoughts on it. And then Danny, if you would hang on after this is over, I have an actual question that doesn't pertain to the group, so I don't want to tie everybody up.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, this is a good or at least I feel like, you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but this is a good first sort of like conversation to get everybody thinking about this, and hopefully by next month, and I'll follow up with our other liaisons who weren't here to make sure that they're thinking about it as well. So having some dates on the calendar, stuff ready to go by next month at the end of August is probably a good goal to have. Does that feel feasible?
This was very helpful to hear everybody else's. And I threw some out, just so you know, I think 3 primary approaches to outreach that are in my head into the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to add those to the notes too. We also have to do this partner reception, but we run out of time to talk about that. Sorry about that, folks. And our friend Rob, who many of you have met, but we'll talk some more and refresh us all about cooperative development. And I'm handing over the mic to Kim and Rob and let him in.
Cool. Yeah, we'll let Rob in. And yeah, Rob's awesome. He's gonna, well, let's just wait for Rob to get on.
And Steve, yeah, I can hang out afterwards for a few minutes anyway. Let me double check, but I think so.
There we go. Welcome, Rob.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. On our call today, as we have discussed a couple of times, we have our partners and liaisons throughout our 14 county region who are working with CBIT to help promote and facilitate business transitions across types of transitions, be they on the open market, family, workers cooperatives, which is why we brought you in. And I will make you a co-host so that if you have any slides you want to share, you can do so. And yeah, take it away, Rob.
Okay. Good to see you all, meet you. I do have slides just to move through a bunch of information quickly, and I will move through it, most of it really quickly, and then that way we can talk. But I'll get a bunch of stuff out there. So let me just jump in.
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt her really quickly. But Rob and I chatted yesterday, and he was really interested in knowing kind of the work that we're doing and wanted to make sure that the presentation was really tailored. And we talked about the big thing for you all as liaisons is around kind of what would be the right type of business that would be a candidate for a worker-owned cooperative, like Brown. I'm at Brown, listen to me, Ward Lumber. And so anyway, Rob's awesome. You'll love him. I'm sure you all know him already.
Thanks. Thank you for that kind introduction. Yeah, I want to make sure that this is relevant and meets your needs and your goals and such. So let me put some ideas out there and some information, and then, like I said, make sure there's plenty of room for you to ask all the questions you may have. So yeah, we do sort of put this idea out there in the context of exit planning, business owners trying to figure out what to do with their business when the time comes to retire. As you'll see, let me just introduce CDI, because I don't know most of you, or I don't think we've met. But CDI is a nonprofit that works throughout the Northeast. We've been around since 1994. We are the USDA designated Northeast Center for Cooperative Business Development. We do a lot of work in housing cooperatives, specifically mobile home parks, converting those to resident-owned cooperatives. A lot of work in startup cooperative businesses, consulting with existing cooperatives, with training technical assistance, and then the work that I do. I run a program, Business Ownership Solutions, and have had a great partnership for a long time with Anka, just as a partner who's on the ground in the region with a lot of good connections like you all folks. So Business Ownership Solutions works with existing businesses on transitions to worker cooperatives. So I don't do any startup work. We're working with going concerns, and we provide a wide range of services in doing that. So everything from sort of the initial exit planning, education, and outreach work with business owners to cooperative design. We have a CPA on staff that does valuations, financial analyses, business planning. Whenever we can, we partner with other entities that have good services to offer, like SBDC. So oftentimes I'll partner with an SBDC to pick up some portion of this work. Like, can you do the business plan? I help them do market research. Awesome, thanks. I'll be back, right? So we definitely are eager to partner with other service providers to get this work done. And then up through and including the transaction structuring and helping secure financing. And then when we do work with a company that has transitioned, it's important to point out, we continue to work with that new worker cooperative that took ownership of that business for usually any number of years afterwards, providing some education, coaching, technical assistance, training, etc., in all sorts of ways, from management training to board training to membership education and so forth. So the context here, hopefully it's not new to any of you, but business owners, like much of the United States, particularly in rural areas, are getting older. And this is from the Business Enterprise Institute, a national survey that showed that nearly 3/4 of business owners think they're going to retire within a decade, and actually about a third think they're going to retire within 3 years. And yet, fewer than 1 in 5 business owners have a written succession plan. So lots of business owners thinking they're going to retire. Very few of them are actually planning for that. And that right there ought to point at a problem for businesses, particularly in rural areas, right? A small business goes under in a rural town, it is far more impactful than if it happens in like some major metro area. So, and then the fear of, will it be replaced? When the local hardware store goes under, it is doubtful that something's going to replace it. People are just going to drive the 60 miles to get to Home Depot, and then they're not going to change their patterns. So that is the challenge. These are just some different stats. A recent survey in Massachusetts, which I thought was kind of shocking, for every business that sells, 9 liquidate and close. So that's the landscape, referred to as the silver tsunami by some, kind of catchy, also somewhat problematic, but yeah, this idea of this aging baby boomer wave of business owners who don't understand the exit planning process or options and aren't planning appropriately. And how do we help them do that so that we can preserve these businesses and create new ownership opportunities, ideally for their workers, if it makes sense, right? Everything is in that context. We are not a hammer in search of a nail, right? It has to fit, it has to make sense, it has to be feasible. Everybody's going to want it and put the work in to do it. And certainly the pandemic, inflation, supply chain craziness, business owners are stressed, and they have been stressed for several years now. And so a lot of these surveys are showing business owners are really starting to actively reach out and ask questions because they're just burnt. They're just burned out, and they want to figure it out. Before it was procrastination. Now they're like, okay, time to plan. So there is that. So to today's topic, one option that we work with business owners on, if they're interested and it makes sense, is the idea of a worker cooperative buyout. So I'm going to give you some examples and walk through a little bit of some of the factors that we look at, or that a business owner should be looking at, or a group of workers. So this is a quote from Entrepreneur Magazine. I like to use this quote because I think it makes the point nicely. This is the buyer that's right under your nose, right? Like business owners are thinking about, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Who would want this business? Well, talk to your workers, think about this option. Sometimes it could be the most viable option. Putting business on the open market has all its own challenges, right? Families have challenges, family transitions. So this could be a very viable option. I just want to touch quickly. I wasn't sure if you've had any introduction to ESOPs, but I want to just touch super quickly on this, because if you suggest employee ownership to a business owner, the likely response is going to be, oh, you mean an ESOP? And so I just want to make sure you even know what an ESOP is. An employee stock ownership plan is a creature of federal statute. It is a qualified defined contribution benefit plan that's invested in the sponsoring employer's stock. So kind of like a 401k, only all in the company stock, with tremendous tax advantages for both the seller and the company. So this is just a little bit about how an ESOP works, but we're not talking about ESOPs because ESOPs are relatively very expensive to put in place. So they only make sense for companies of a certain size. And I think the majority of the companies that you're going to be talking to, business owners that you're going to be talking to, it will not make sense. It absolutely doesn't make financial sense. You're talking about $75,000 to $100,000 to put it in place, and then $25,000, $50,000, $75,000 a year to maintain it. So to have the cash, a business needs to be of a particular size to afford those sunk costs. And that's not the vast majority of businesses, I think, that you're probably going to be talking to. But I did just want you to understand, like, this is the basic definition of an ESOP. And when you suggest employee ownership to a business owner and they say, oh, you mean an ESOP? You have something to say. So we're going to talk about worker cooperatives, and the definition of a worker cooperative is a business that's jointly owned and controlled by the workers and that operates for the benefit of those workers. And that's the fundamental definition of any cooperative. It is an enterprise of some sort that is owned and controlled by members and that operates for the benefit of those members. So whether it's a credit union, which is a financial services cooperative, or a lobster co-op, or a grain co-op, or a dairy co-op, or a food co-op, they all adhere to this basic definition of some sort of membership-based enterprise that is owned and controlled by the members and that operates for the benefit of those members. So when we're talking about worker cooperatives, we're talking about workers. So just a few basics. I use the word members. I want to stress worker cooperatives usually are corporations, but they're a very different type of corporation. They are a membership-based corporation, not a capital-based corporation. So, in a capital-based corporation, one shareholder owns 50%, one owns 5%, one owns 10%, right? That's a capital-based corporation. The ownership is based on their ownership interest, their financial investment. A membership-based corporation is, as it says here, it's a one member, one share, one vote, sometimes referred to as a democratic corporation because of that one member, one share, one vote. So it is based on membership. Workers buy one share and only one share, and they are a member of the cooperative. And they do buy a share. So there is a financial investment and they directly own the business. Not all workers have to be owners, and owners have no guarantee of employment. This is like one of the first questions. How many of my workers need to do this for it to make sense? Or what if one of my workers doesn't want to do it? It's all fine. We can make it work. But that said, ownership is not a get out of jail free card. It doesn't, you still have a job to do. You still have to show up and do it. You still have a supervisor, right? So there's no guarantee of employment just because you own a share of the company. And then the monetary benefit is that you are getting a share of the annual net income. And that is based on what's called patronage, but we're not even going to get into those details today. There are some tax advantages, can be for the owner. Don't want to overstate that. It's a couple of small needles that need to be threaded for that to work, but when it does work, it is quite lucrative. For the company, there are some tax advantages from traditional corporations. Just enough to say for today's purposes that there are some tax advantages. And we can get into the weeds of what those are at another time if you're interested, or if there's a business owner who's interested. This is where I think I'll slow down a little bit. I want to touch on some of these things. We always get this question, who's a good candidate? Is my business a good candidate? Well, what makes a business a good candidate for considering this option is the same things that would make them a good candidate for anybody to want to buy their business, right? That's like the fundamental point to understand here. The workers are buyers, and all the normal rules of buying a business would apply. So it's all about the track record, right? Track record of stability, customer stability, cash flow stability, leadership stability. Is there an interest in preserving legacy? Most business owners are quite proud of what they built and would like the opportunity to see it continue on past them. Not all, and there's no judgment in that, but most business owners, there's a pride factor here, right? And so that is a piece of it. If that is a motivating factor for that business owner, then they're a good candidate. But the fundamentals are really about the track record. Stability, cash flow, leadership, customers, vendors, etc. Workforce, right? So I'm going to give you a couple examples just to kind of give you examples. And they tend to fall into a couple of broad buckets. There's this idea of immediate exit, and this is what we're trying to avoid, right? Like lack of planning, and then, you know, I'm ready to retire. I'm going to get a business broker, and they're going to sell my business for me, and that is working less and less often. It could be the tragic case of a death or disability of the primary business owner, right? If it's a family business and the person who runs it for the family, even if other family members work in it, there could be a death or disability situation, and they're left holding the keys and don't know what to do. It could be a bankruptcy. So this immediate exit, challenging. It's what we're trying to avoid, but it is possible. Phased exit is, I think, why we're all here. It's what we want to encourage. We want people to plan, because that is how they're going to have an exit plan that is reasonable, well thought out, meets all their goals, minimizes their tax consequences, right? Like all of what you want is likely possible to some degree if you plan and give yourself 3 to 5 years, at least a couple of years, but it's really great if people give themselves, 3, 4 years. And then there's this other option, which I want you to understand, but it's less about exit planning, certainly in the immediate future. It's really about restructuring the company to improve growth, improve firm performance, improve sustainability by vesting employees. And I'll show you some examples of that as well. So an example of immediate exit is the Island Employee Cooperative, which is a quite large business, one of the larger employers in a very remote rural community, Deer Isle, Maine, Stonington, Maine. So it's a large grocery store, a medium-sized grocery store, and an Ace Hardware, all owned by one guy. And it's the class, he thought his businesses were a gold mine, and he thought who wouldn't want them. And so he just worked and worked and worked. And when he was ready to retire, hired a business broker, and 2 years later was still waiting. And so, because turns out nobody wants these businesses on an island in a very remote rural community, and it would be very hard for nobody there could afford them, and it would be very hard for somebody to come in from the outside to take them over for all sorts of obvious and maybe less obvious reasons. So one thing led to another. I was introduced to him, and we did this transaction, a very large, very complicated transaction, in just under 12 months. Lots of problems. I think there's lots of cautionary tales in this deal about taking your time, but it's done, and they're a good, this was almost 10 years or 9 years ago now. So, they're doing well, but it was unnecessarily rocky in a million different ways. So a cautionary tale about taking time and planning. Another sort of immediate exit, Liberty Graphics, which is a t-shirt manufacturing, t-shirt printing company that has a national reputation, but is also based in Maine. Another example of a business owner who just waited and kept talking about, I want my employees to have the company, but never did anything to actually plan that. So that, another good conversion. They're doing great. About 35, almost 50 employees here. It would have been much smoother had he planned a few years prior, but this is an example where he had a decent management team. And so we were able to fix a lot of things that weren't working well under his ownership pretty quickly, because there was some decent leadership there. So this idea of a phased exit. So these are some better examples, I think, of good process and good planning. This is a coffee roasting company and a cafe in Rockland, Maine, Rock City Roasters and Rock City Cafe. We spent almost 4 years organizing this, and she was a methodical planner, the woman who owned this business. And even after transition, after the transaction, she stayed on as a general manager for another year to just continue that very phased transition, and it went really well. So another type of business, about 30 employees, another type of business, another sector, just to give you some examples. Ward Lumber, I'm not going to dwell on this. I think you all know the example. It's right in your backyard. But what I would point out is a great example of a strong partnership between us and Small Business Development Center and ANCA, all really working together to help this company move through this process. This is Stamford, New York, Railroad Avenue Supply Company. This is an Ace Hardware, very small. I don't want to say a marginal business, but it's critical to the community, a very small community, but just very small and like thin business. But this sort of encapsulates all the stories. This was a Western Auto in the 60s, owned by Ralph's parents. He didn't want anything to do with it. He wanted to be a teacher, went off to be a teacher. His parents passed away. He owned a hardware store. So, and then he tried to sell it on the open market about once a decade. 3 or 4 different times. Nobody wanted it. And finally, one of his customers suggested, I know this idea and I know somebody you should talk to and about selling to your employees. So today, this company, small Ace Hardware, 8 employees, I believe, 8 or 9, now own this business. And he's stayed on as a chair of the board and a trainer for Sarah, who's the general manager in the picture here. So really a good, very well-phased exit for him, exit from ownership, then exit from management. And just another sector, much smaller company than some of the other examples. This is this idea of restructuring for growth. This is a landscaping company in the Hudson River Valley, south of you. Earth Designs Cooperative, but this was a woman who started a landscaping company, quite high-end, landscape design, landscape architecture, installations, and she built the company, had 20 employees, and she was still acting like it was just her and her truck and her helper, which is not structurally management sustainable. So this, and plus skilled trades, right, in a pretty economically good region. So this was a lot about her vesting her employees in ownership in order to attract and retain talent. So this idea of skilled trades, attraction and retention of talent, vesting your employees makes transitions to worker cooperatives a really attractive thing for mid-stage entrepreneurs if they they know about it. Another example, another sector, this is an insurance company in Western Maine. They have a couple of offices, very rural region. But this was a 5th generation insurance company. This company was started before the Civil War. And Michael in the middle was the 5th generation. And there was no 6th generation who wanted to own an insurance brokerage in rural Maine. This was great in that there was an ownership transition. He sold the company. He stayed on as the CEO, general manager for I think 2 to 3 years, and now he's backed himself out of that too. And a young woman in this picture, Michelle, is now the CEO of the company, and Michael is just selling insurance, living the dream, right? He's just another worker, and so this is just a good example of this taking your time, and he has completely backed himself out of all of the ownership and management responsibilities. And he's just a worker doing his job, and very successful transaction there. Some advantages and disadvantages. This is just touching the surface, right? But I just to have some talking points for you. Advantages, I think the cooperative model is extremely flexible. It's very lightly regulated. You can set it up in a lot of different ways. I gave you all these different thumbnail sketches of these transition stories to see they all happen in very different ways, different types of businesses. Sometimes owner stays on, sometimes not, in different capacities. So there's a lot of flexibility. You can really define goals and design a plan that meets them for a business owner. It's relatively low cost as exit planning goes and transactions go. I say low cost generally in comparison to an ESOP is the point to make there. It is direct ownership. They are forming a cooperative corporation. They're buying a business. They're shareholders in that corporation. And I think that all lends itself to a level of seriousness, a level of skin in the game that is really beneficial. This idea of shared risk, I mean, entrepreneurs are a rare breed and not everybody's cut out for it. Most people are not cut out for it. And however, this idea of shared risk in a cooperative ownership model and the idea of cooperative ownership and shared risk, I think makes entrepreneurship accessible and feel less risky to a lot more people. And so that idea of shared risk, I think, is a great advantage. And it's an inside friendly sale. And by that, I mean, you can really design the transition, do all the work, do the transition, and nobody needs to know about it, right? And there's some serious business advantages to that. Your customers, you can shield them from any sense of uncertainty that may come if you go list your business with a business broker, for example. Disadvantages, unfamiliarity. How many of you knew anything about what a worker cooperative was before this little intro? And same goes for business owners, right? So, and unfamiliarity leads to a sense of risk. What you don't know about sounds risky. So those are definitely disadvantages but they can be overcome through, information, outreach, etc. I put under here disadvantage, this idea of leadership needs, because honestly, most small business owners do not invest well or at all in developing good leadership, invest in management, training. Just because somebody's good at a job, then they go get put in charge of others doing that job. That's how people become managers, and it's a different skill set. So we see a lot of times, I put this under disadvantages just because that's what we see. Not good investments in leadership development, management training, management development. There's no bench. And so that is something that we look for, and then we come up with a plan to address in the course of a transition. Some other advantages, challenges, some stated in different ways, some than previously, but this idea of the greater control of process does equal reduced risk. You can really, it's that idea of the inside friendly sale. Owners and buyers know each other's strengths and weaknesses, right? There's no cat and mouse game here when you're doing an arm's length transaction. That can be really beneficial in a transaction. And the owner can remain in some amount of control if they want until paid off. And that feels like a nice hedge to a lot of business owners in some way, those who choose to exercise that. And again, just the challenges there, it goes without saying that the vast majority of workers have limited financial resources. They've never owned a business. They don't have experience in management or business decision making or financial education, right? So these are things that need to be overcome. Again, they can be overcome with good education programs. It's definitely going to be a longer departure timeline, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that much longer. Nobody sells a business overnight. There aren't a lot of people out there ready to just like write a check and hand over the keys for a business. So, but it's definitely, a business owner should assume it's going to be a longer timeline. And then this idea of differing perceptions of value, which can sometimes be a challenge, sometimes not, but I list it because it comes up. And by that, I mean between a business owner and the workers. So that's something that comes up sometimes, not always, but when it does, you gotta deal with it. I want to stress this idea here, that in any transition, it doesn't matter if it's a worker cooperative or if they're trying to sell it or if it's a family transition, there needs to be a plan for, there needs to be a disentangling of these different ideas around it. What is the ownership transition? What is the governance transition? And what is the management transition? And just to say that you can sell a company doesn't mean that somebody can step in and know how to manage it. It doesn't mean that there's existing good management being sold with the company, right? So, and to a business owner, usually these three things are indistinguishable. They do it all. They don't distinguish between them. But if they're going to sell the company, they need to distinguish between these things and have a plan for each. And then just a basic practical framework for the process. I mean, this is how we move through the process. It almost always starts with the business owner. They reach out, tell me about this thing you do. Somebody told me I should talk to you. And then we go through a whole assessment process, and these are all like kind of go, no go type things. If things keep looking good and people are interested, we keep moving forward. And as I mentioned at the outset, we always work with a company after a transition because getting them through a transition does not make them successful. They need quite a bit of work ongoing, but that's how we structure our work with a company. So, and that's that. So I will stop my share and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was awesome. I think the examples are just, it's across all different types of industries, all different sizes. Yeah, really, really good. Yeah, questions for Rob?
I can kick us off here, Kim. And first, Rob, thank you for that and good to see you. I'll note that I have some pre-existing connection with Rob from the 2018 North Country Symposium that we did at St. Lawrence University, where we were talking about the theme of it was owning our future in the North Country, and it was all about cooperatives and worker cooperatives and ESOPs and things of that nature. And of course, CDI was part of the panel that we had of organizations that can help work with those endeavors. So good to see you, Rob. And in fact, I think I have a really great report that Rob did on cooperatives, building cooperatives in Maine, that I'd be happy to share around. That was a great report. I guess I have a couple questions for you, Rob, and one is, it's amazing, as Kim said, it's almost like you've got a real movement of cooperatives happening in Maine. As all those examples you gave, and it's across a lot of different industries and stuff. And so one question is, I'm going to throw both of you at once because they're related. One is, how do we build that kind of movement in the North Adirondack North Country? And here's the related question is, recently we had a business in Canton sell that would have been absolutely perfect for a worker cooperative. It had, it has 150 employees, or had 150 employees, very educated employees. It was just, well-established business. It met all those criterias that you laid out in one of those slides about, what makes an ideal worker cooperative. Unfortunately, he sold to a competitor. And shortly after that, the competitor laid off a bunch of employees from the business, and things didn't go the way the previous owner was hoping. How do you get ahead of, how do we get ahead of that kind of scenario and help, make the owners of businesses such as that aware of these possibilities? Anyway, I just kind of, hopefully that makes sense where I'm trying to go with all this in terms of building the capacity for creating worker cooperatives in our region. And so I throw that out to you for your thoughts.
Yeah. So, I live in Maine. I have clients clients all over the country, mostly in the Northeast, but, and I guess we do have a decent concentration here in Maine, but it starts with, I guess to your first question, like it starts with outreach and education. I have not everybody most people don't know who I am, right? Or what CDI is. So, I have relationships with all the SBDC advisors in Maine. SBDC sends me business owners. I want to introduce you to so-and-so. He owns such and such. I told him about this thing you do and answered a few of his questions. Can you talk to him? Of course. So it's the Chamber of Commerce. The chamber director, the outreach person at the chamber is like, I want to introduce you to this member who was asking what the chamber can do to help around exit planning. Do we know resources? And they were interested in what you do. Can you talk to them? Yes, of course. So it's really about the partnerships. I'll use the word ecosystem, right? Like it's about the business development, workforce development ecosystem, and that people have some ability to have a conversation with business owners, either reactively or preferably proactively, that we're encouraging business owners. And so to your second question about the company in New York, that should have started with really good exit planning education and assistance. Because, I do not judge business owners and what they choose to do. Like, I have my wishes, but they're going to do what they need to do to secure their retirement. But what I want to make sure is that business owners understand clearly the exit planning process. They understand options and pros and cons, and they understand their own goals, and that they come up with an exit plan that actually meets their goals. If that business owner's goals were to cash out as quickly as possible for the highest dollar value he could get as quick, maybe he met his goals, and that's unfortunate if a lot of people lost their jobs as a result of it, but that's the way the world works. But if he thought what he was doing was like securing the future of his business and taking care of his employees and taking care of his retirement, then he didn't meet his goals, right? So I just think the idea of helping business owners get really, really clear and specific about their goals and priorities, like what is it you want to see? What is it you want to make happen? Okay, let's come up with a plan that will make that happen. And so without knowing the business owner or what was going through his mind, I gotta assume that's probably not what he wanted to see. But once he didn't own it, he lost control.
Right.
And I will, because we're just moving quickly here, the one element that fits your story was with the Island Employee Cooperative. There was one offer, and it was from a competitor, and it was, I don't know, well, I do know, but it was referred to as an insultingly lowball offer. And he told him, I'm going to lay off every one of your employees and they'll all be welcome to reapply for their job. Mm-hmm. He just wanted to reset wages to minimum wage, right? That's what that means. You want to cut out older employees who are being paid better. And there were decently paid jobs for rural retail, grocery. There were pretty good paying jobs. And he said no, right? So he was clear in his goals, and that's what part of what put me in touch with them is like, I don't want to, it's clear that that's what's going to happen if I let this go in this direction. So what are my options? So I just put that piece of that story out there because it bolsters what you're saying.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. We probably have time for one more question, and then we have some other material that we need to cover, and we will absolutely share. Rob, is it okay if we share the presentation with everyone?
Yeah, I can make a PDF out of it and share it.
Okay, awesome. We'll share the presentation and obviously Rob's contact information, but if anybody else has anything.
Is it okay if I put Jenna on the spot? Jenna, you don't have to say who it is, but you're working with someone who's thinking about this. How did that conversation start?
I think it goes back to their priorities as the owners, and that's come up a lot today, which is really interesting. And not something I've really thought about a lot since being part of CBIT. So they are very employee centric and have made that known. So it was kind of just a suggestion as, have you thought about this as an opportunity? And they've been looking into it a little bit more, and I think they're leaning towards it, but are still gathering information. So
yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, it's important to stress, like, the goal here isn't turn you all into certified exit planners or like cooperative transition technical assistance providers, right? Like, there's people who do all that, and the goal is just to help you have either a reactive or proactive, productive conversation with business owners who need to start thinking about this and should really understand process and options and the idea of goal setting. So that, it's to start a conversation, not to continue it or let alone finish it, right? So, the relationship that I have with Anka, and there's others, Cooperative Fund of the Northeast is a CDF, a Community Development Finance Institution that lends to all of these deals and is a very favorable lender, very easy to work with, always looking to get to yes, right? Like a real partner in the deal. So, there is funding out there to finance the deals. There's capital, there's technical assistance, there's education and training. And there are folks like some of you who are like professionally, like business development, workforce development folks, who know how to engage in some pieces of this puzzle, and it would be great to do that with you all. So
cool. Again, thank you, Rob. Just great information, and really kind of funny. So Title IX is, it's women's clothing, and I actually reached out to them via Messenger because I think they're an awesome candidate for an employee-owned cooperative. So I'm trying to spread the word. It's all good. Cool. Alrighty. Again, thank you, Rob. You're welcome to stay on or go, up to you. If you can send that over, we'll make sure your presentation and contact information gets out to everybody.
Great.
Cool.
This was awesome, Rob. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Alrighty, boys and girls, let's see. We're going to push through because we're a little bit behind. No big deal, but hopefully if people need a break, they have been taking it. We are going to, one of the things, we have two things that we wanted to cover today. I'm pretty sure we're not going to get to both of them, but that's okay because we still have many more months together. Last month, we talked about valuation and went through some examples of valuation. And I will provide you with a little bit more information, but there were some specific examples when we were talking about valuation that were a little bit less. Oh wait, here do I go? We need a little bit more input on. And so we're just going to walk through those fairly quickly. One of the items that we talked about was rent. when a business owner owns the building, whether it's owned, whether the business owns the building or some sort of separate entity owns the building. And sometimes that, like I was a case where that business owner is paying themselves above market rent because it's a way to not have to pay some payroll taxes. This is the adjustment that you would make. So the rent amount on the books is $48,000, so $4,000 a month. The fair market value for that rent is $36,000, so $3,000 a month. You would make that adjustment of $12,000 to bring that rent down to what the new business owner would expect to pay. Like, for example, I sold the business, I did not sell the building, and then I rented to the buyer and I charged them fair market value for the business. There are also instances where a business owner is either not paying rent because the business owns the building, so there's no actual rent on the books, or they're paying below market rent. I had an owner that just couldn't afford to, it was just kind of the way it worked out. In that instance, the adjustment that we want to make is a negative number so that the resulting true business expense is fair market value for that rent. So that would be a negative number there. And please, guys, ask questions as we go along. The other is owner's compensation. If there's only one owner, you get to add back 100% of what that owner is making, both in terms of their pay and their taxes. So fairly straightforward, because again, we're trying to get to this idea of what is the total cash benefit to an owner of buying the business, that seller's discretionary earnings of the business. Now, what if we have that same scenario? It's 100,000, but it's two owners. There's a husband and wife, potentially father, daughter, any kind of scenario that way. And what I actually like to do is to break it out so that those owners' pays are actually on two separate lines. We get to add back 100%, and they're both, let's say they're both making 50,000. We get to add back the pay for one owner. And let's say that second owner is on the books making 50,000, but the new owner would only need to pay someone 35,000 to do that same job. You can see we made that $15,000 adjustment so that the true business expense is only 35,000. Similarly, I have instances where there is an owner, and I should have probably, I'll give you this example as well. One owner on the books, second owner does bookkeeping, but doesn't make any money. The new owner would need to replace that individual. So we would need to make that adjustment, and I'll share that with you. Similarly, let's say we have a situation where an owner has employed in this instance, I said a nephew who's making more than market for the job that they're doing. Total payroll for the business is 150,000. That nephew is making 20,000 more than he really should be. The true business expense is 130,000. So we add that 20,000 back in to get to the 130,000, and then we prorate the taxes. I know we're getting into the weeds here a little bit. I just wanted you guys to kind of understand some things conceptually. I'll always be available as a resource if you get into kind of situations where you're not 100% clear kind of what's going on. Yeah, that was the end of that. And you guys have any questions on that? We're going to go back. I'm going to go back. Wait, get out of here for stop my share. We had the first 1 hour overview, and that would be your first session like we talked about. So you could invite any business owner that is thinking about transitioning over the next year, 5 years, whatever. Session 2 would be more about folks who are, oh, hold on one sec here. I gotta open my presentation. Bear with me. I gotta find my presentation. Bear with me. There's 7. Would be more for folks who are kind of ready to start to like actively pursue selling their business. And we're not going to have time to go through this whole thing, but I just want to kind of share with you conceptually. I will provide you with kind of speaking notes, and I will actually insert them in the notes section versus a separate document, unless you tell me that you like having the separate document, or if you like them embedded in the slides. So you guys let me know. I can do it either way. Kind of the idea is we're going to review valuation. Kind of these are concepts that we went through in the first, that 1 hour presentation, that hopefully you're all feeling like you're getting to a reasonable level of comfort. And now we're going to dig into kind of using that Excel worksheet, kind of this concept of validating the price. Is it a valuation that works for the seller, but it also needs to work for the buyer? And what does that look like? And then this idea of creating a sell sheet. The two things that a business owner needs to really be able to move actively to selling their business is that the sell sheet and the valuation. So, valuation, sell sheet, those are the two things. This is just the review of valuation, this concept of what you need to value. Here we provide a little bit more specific information about how to value inventory. This concept that it's possible. I've had several businesses where their inventory was so high that it wouldn't cash flow. How do you manage that? That it's an instance where you may need to sell off inventory in order for it to work. Sometimes it's a concept of understanding, creating a framework around which to value the inventory versus creating an actual value. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Similarly, sometimes there are high capital businesses where there's just too much expense, too much FF&E to be able to sell the business, kind of digging in on that a little bit. This idea of coming up with a price. There is the real estate. We cover this in the first session, but again, kind of a review. This review of sellers' discretionary earnings. What is that? Because it takes many times to hear something for it to really sink in. So even though it's a review, I think it's really helpful to work with your sellers so that they understand this concept a little bit deeper. Kind of this walking through a P&L and how you add back, and I have notes on all of this to get to cash flow, and then how cash flow, this idea of examples of these types of business of expenses that are run through a business at their discretion, has no bearing on the success of the business. Life insurance, gym memberships, and things like that. And then this concept of the one-time expenses and how that gets us to sellers' discretionary earnings. Again, just kind of this visual to help walk them through. These are the categories that sellers' discretionary earnings, the categories that tend to have these types of expenses in them. Then this idea of these one-time expenses that also get to be added back. Hopefully this is a review for everybody. Hopefully you're fairly comfortable with some of these concepts because we've been through it a couple of times, but if not, please stop me, reach out to me, either way. There is this idea, like things that you cannot add back, just some thoughts on, if you're going to count just examples of things that you don't want to add back. This idea that sellers' discretionary earnings really is the best way to value a business. getting familiar with the spreadsheet that we're going to use. And you can either share this spreadsheet with your business owners and they populate it and then work with you, or it might be something that you work with, like we did last session, where we, you sit down, and this really is the most efficient way to do it, is for you to sit down with your business owner. They have their P&Ls in hand. You populate the spreadsheet using their P&Ls. When you're in your session, having them think about think about your business and your P&Ls, and what are some of the things that you can think about right now that are discretionary in nature, and have a little dialogue about that. Again, this idea that you're going to share the worksheet with them. And again, there's kind of final considerations around it. This idea of multipliers. I'll run through this. I'm going to share this with you. If you feel like we're getting too into the weeds in this and you'd like something, actually, I'm going to send it out. You guys can do whatever you want with it once you get it, right? Like, you're going to tailor this presentation to fit your own flow. And so I want to go into the weeds a little bit for those that feel comfortable with it. But if you don't, like, take it out and we don't need to worry about it. But here's some of how we take sellers' discretionary earnings. We apply a multiplier, and that helps us create the value of the goodwill. This idea of valuation guides, and that business owners can work with the SBDC to get their valuation guides. This concept that these are the multipliers, and the multipliers have a range. And it's that range, again, it's 50% of sales, or 2 to 3.5 times SDE. And it can create quite a wide difference in the value of the goodwill, which obviously affects validating the price, because everybody wants to try to get the highest price, but does it cash flow? So here's an example. We've gone through this, what it looks like with financing, and how it doesn't cash flow at a high valuation, but hopefully it does cash flow at the lower valuation. And just conceptually getting an owner to understand that it has to work for both the buyer and the seller, and going through this exercise is a really great way for them to understand it, and potentially for them to show a potential buyer how the valuation does work. Yep, there we go. And that you're probably going to land somewhere in between. When they put their business on the market, they're going to want to start probably at a valuation that's a little bit higher, because there will be negotiation that goes on, but they need to understand kind of what their walkaway price is. And then we go into sell sheets, and I know this is fairly straightforward. We have been through this, but what a sell sheet is, it's a resume for their business. You want to emphasize the greatest strengths of the business. It's not, everything about the business. Here's what a sell sheet looks like, and then digging into the different elements of the sell sheet and what you want to include or not include. Examples of what these different elements of the sell sheet look like. And as I said, I'll provide notes for all of you so that you can walk through this. And I will, in our next session, Danny and I will talk about how we want to have you present this information. So when we did the not last session, but the one before that, when we had you kind of get familiar with the material and share a portion of it with other partners and liaisons in the breakout room. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Would you rather take a different approach to getting familiar with the material? Do you just want to wing it with your first group and hope it goes well? Any thoughts or comments on that?
I wasn't here for that, so I can't
Got it. Okay.
I wouldn't
provide any
either.
input.
Okay. Cool. Well, provide the feedback, and if you want to shoot me an email, that kind of thing. But I will make sure that, because this is the content, like Jenna, I think it was you that asked about the content that you would use to do these working groups. This is the content. And
Yep.
so we have the 1 hour overview of the whole process, digging in on particular things. Here we talk about valuation and sell sheet so that an owner can get to market. And then the third session will be around kind of legal consideration, financing options. And there's probably one more thing in there that I can't remember.
And Kim, I put it in the chat, but next month we'll have maybe start with the training and have a quick fire call to make sure that we're getting through as much of the material that we need to.
I will get this second presentation buttoned up and out to you so that you can get familiar with it. And Danny and I will kind of decide how we want to structure August's group. And yeah, so we like to be respectful of your time and end on time. So it is 11:01, and unless there are additional questions or considerations, kind of given that everybody, I think, is getting clarity around the expectations of the working group and the content and how you'll market it. We're here as resources for you. So please, feel free to use us and start to think about what you want your working group to look like.